Well, good morning. Thank you to the media for being here and all the guests that we have. I want to thank you for coming out for this. We think this is a very important day for law enforcement and for the citizens, not only of the county here in Columbia, but also across the United States for what is I'm going to explain here. Thank you to Clay Whittle, the sheriff. Again, yes, known him for many years. In developing an app, you have to have a lot of people. And so when I came to the sheriff a couple of years ago and told him my idea of what I was developing, he said, anything you want. And so you can see that just by having the facility here, testing out an app, you have to have a lot of bodies just to punch buttons, make sure everything works. And he has given us free access to all his people. We've had many sessions here working on the app, and more importantly is the people that he has working for him that really gave us some input to the categories, to some of the hard questions that had to be asked. You know, how secure is it? How does it work? How does it protect us? Are we protected? Is our information protected? So we worked out all of those issues with the department, so thank you so much for all of his people. Again, I think it's a very important day for law enforcement and for the citizens, because now we have a way to collect information from a critical incident, collect it properly, and use that information for reports, whether it be for the defense of an officer or just general use of force reports across the United States. I retired from the GBI, like I said, for 30 years, so when I first started working these cases, the standard was different. I'd go out, work a shooting, work some here in Columbia County with Scott Johnson over at the food line, where they had 9 people held hostage, and they had to end up taking care of the suspects in that case, shooting them. But the standard back then was we go out, collected the evidence, took pictures, measurements, collected anything that may have been at the scene. Also, the second part of that was interviewing the police officer. Back then, the standard was if I could just get the officer in some form or fashion to say I was in fear for my life, I could close up my notebook and about go home and send it to the DA, and that was the end of the case. And that was the standard until we came across Graham v. Connor, a Supreme Court case ruling which changed everything. Changed the way we looked at these cases, changed the way that we as officers are judged in these types of cases, and we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years things have really gone crazy with these types of cases. These cases are different. It's not just a normal homicide, rape, burglary, in that we know on these cases, for the most part, who, what, when, and where. We pretty much know all that. Usually that's an unknown in a lot of other cases. But in these cases, we know those. The only thing that we don't know is the why. And Graham v. Connor says the why comes from the officer. The officer has to explain his or her actions for taking somebody's life or using force. So now that has to be documented. The problem that we've had is we've never been trained as officers to document that. I've been through use of force training every year, still go to it. And they tell us about Graham v. Connor. They say it's the objective reasonableness of an officer involving the totality of the circumstances, everything taken into account, everything in that one incident without 20/20 hindsight, and being able to document that case. So things have changed. Now we have to document these cases in a different way. So really what we have is a concept to this solution where we're not getting correct information. Usually an officer may be terminated immediately after a use of force incident. And so now where does that information come from? This app was developed for the defense of officers. It is attorney-client privileged information, attorney-client work product that is for their defense. The case came about in 2018 when I was called in by the Police Benevolence Association, or PBA, to work a case down in Kingsland, Georgia. Miss Adrian Browning of Tucker Browning, who you'll meet in a minute, represented Zachariah Presley. I was called in about a week later. I already knew what he had told his attorney, what he told her about what had happened. It was a vehicle chase, crash, 2 people ran out, fight, suspect grabs Zachariah's gun. Zach has to shoot the suspect and kills the suspect. He's immediately charged with a crime. I'm able to walk through with police officers after an incident, walking through the scene and asking questions. So I'm asking Zach, what were you thinking when the suspect did this? Or what were you thinking when your taser did not work? What were you thinking? And he'd tell me some things. And I'd say, Zach, why didn't you tell your attorney that last week? He said, well, I didn't think it was that important. After about the third, I didn't think it was that important, it clicked in my mind. I said, we've got to bridge that gap, and that's where the gap is. Graham v. Connor says, coming from the officer to the attorney, how do we bridge that gap? And that's when I started thinking about thin blue to fin at that time and getting these cognitive questions, not so much how many times did you shoot, but why did you shoot? So those are the important questions that have to be asked. So that's how it all started. I came home from that case, and Pat Cullen, who is a representative of PBA, were sitting in my driveway. I said, Pat, we've got to do something for these officers. He said, well, I don't know, what can we do? I said, well, what about a laminated card? And then we got to thinking, well, that's going to be too huge. There's no way we can do that. He said, well, Guy, everybody's using apps. Let's talk about that. So I said, I'll develop an app. So that's how it came about. The app has basically 3 sections. To onboard your equipment, the officer has to put in all the equipment, because it's important later on during the incident that officer is able to click on those pieces of equipment he or she had during that one incident. Migrates into a total weight. Now we know that the officer was running with 12.2 pounds. Suspect had on running shorts and tennis shoes. Had to fight the person. We only have so much energy in our body carrying around extra weight. We need to know that. Then we have the incident, where you document an incident, and it's all drop downs, access to your camera, access to your audio recording. The officer does not have to type anything. Now, there are instances where you can type in certain things, but it's all prepared categories based on years of experience in different situations for that officer to document and asking those cognitive questions. Some of the features are 1-button GPS location, 1-button weather. It downloads the weather, because that can affect your decision to use force or not. 1 button for emergency contacts. You put your attorney in from the start. You're able to hit 1 button to call your spouse, your preacher, your pastor, your supervisor, your sheriff. Make those phone calls immediately. Then it gets into the categories of, what was known, what did the officer was told prior to arriving? What was the officer told when he arrived, he or she arrived? What did the suspect do in response to commands? All of those types of cognitive type things are put into these categories. This app is for the officer and the attorney. It is privileged information that only goes to an attorney, so therefore is protected by the attorney-client work product. Now, that's not to say that just a regular use of force case not being investigated, that the officer can't use his or her knowledge to fill out a use of force report that may be mandated by the department. So now the sheriff has a lot better, more real-time information that can dispel rumors or problems with people coming up with stories of their own out there in the public. A sheriff or administrator can now dispel those rumors and have some actual information as to what happened if those officers fill out those reports, which be separate from what they're preparing for their attorney. We anticipate this is going to help out agencies in hiring. The sheriff will tell you about some things that he's doing to retain people. I think he's so many people down from even hiring people. We're hoping also that this will cut down on mitigate some litigation. If we know we have proper, good information on a use of force case, that may mitigate some of that litigation and all these huge payouts that may be coming. So we hope that this app is going to be something for law enforcement that changes the way we look at this. We have never been trained as officers on how to prepare a report. We just haven't. We don't know. We've been told about Graham v. Connor, and at the end of the training, we go home, see you next year. and we'll talk about Graham v. Connor again, but we never given instruction to the officers on how to prepare a report. We take reports from everybody, but now it's very important that we have to document that because it is a Fourth Amendment issue to where we have seized somebody's life. We have taken somebody's life, and we have to document that. We have to be knowledgeable as to why we did certain things, and especially when it goes to a trial. So we hope this really changes across the nation about how we look at these, how officers are investigated. We hope that working on parts of an app to have for an investigative team, like Sheriff Whittle has a team that goes out and looks at use of force cases for other counties. He's been asked by several different counties to come in. So we want this to be a standard so that the public knows, well, we're looking at these cases properly now. We're getting better information to make a better decision as to what we're going to do. At this time, I guess have Sheriff come back up and explain what it is for his department, what it means to him, and then we'll get into some other people to speak here in just a minute. So, Sheriff.
Yes, sir. Hello again, folks. Told you I'd be back. I've got a ton of things I want to tell you today, but some of them I'm going to get the high sign from in the back there telling me I'm taking too long, I'm talking too much, et cetera, and I'm okay with the high sign. I won't adhere to it strictly, but I will get the message after about the fifth frantic one. But it's important that I tell you some things from the standpoint of the sheriff's office and from my standpoint as the sheriff of Columbia County. Excuse me. I've been sheriff here since 1995. Went into law enforcement in way back, late 70s, 79 I believe it was. I'm an old dude now, and I've seen a lot in law enforcement. The one thing I haven't seen until the last 2 years of my career is the change in perception of law enforcement across our country. We can get philosophical about that all day long, but the reality is that we have a group of people scattered out across our country that are in a concerted effort to bring discredit and question upon law enforcement officers. And I think it's by design. And it's working, folks. It's absolutely working. It's a narrative that is being told that is not even close to being true. And that's the bottom line. You can debate me if you want. I gladly welcome it. I will tell you that even today, based on every valid statistic there is in this country, from the FBI on down, less than 1% of law enforcement officers in this country disgrace their badge, i.e. they do something immoral or illegal. Less than 1%. Nobody has that kind of percentage. No one, not even the clergy. Now, I may sound a little prejudiced when I say that, and I am, because I'm proud of what I've done as a law enforcement officer, and I'm proud of the people, especially those people you see standing in that corner over there, that wear that uniform every day for you. We actually have a slogan in this sheriff's office that says, I wear this badge for you. And they do that every day for you. They go out on that street, and their goal is to protect the citizens and the visitors to Columbia County, as do law enforcement officers across the entire nation. There's, again, less than 1% of the badge that goes out saying, I'm going to be a dirty cop today. I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to abuse somebody. I'm going to take someone's life. Folks, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. But the narrative that is being told says it is. We are partly to blame for that narrative. We being the law enforcement agencies the elected officials from city councilmen, county commissioners, mayors, legislators, right on up the line. Elected sheriffs, chiefs of police. We're all responsible for that too. And one of the ways, which is one of the things that I like so much about this app, is the lack of a narrative. And I see that 2-minute warning, it ain't gonna work. But one of the ways is the lack of information that we put out to you, the news media, on the narrative of what actually could happen, or what actually did happen, I should say. I see us changing that narrative from the use of this app. How many folks in here, just by a quick show of hands, how many folks in here have a phone? How many of you got a phone? Everybody's got a phone. How many of you have at least one app on that phone that you use? Why? Works, doesn't it? Makes your life better. It makes your job better. It makes your financial situation better. Whatever the case may be in that answer. Well, guess what? Today, law enforcement finally has an app for that. And it does multiple things. One, it protects the police officer. It protects those deputy sheriffs. When they're involved in a use of force case, it allows them who, put yourself in their mind for a minute, just got through with a deadly force incident. Their adrenaline's pumped up. They could pick this building up off of its foundation. They've got so much adrenaline running in their body. There's a word, and I can never pronounce it right, but it's close to tachypnea, that happens to the human body in a fight or flight syndrome that brings you to gross motor movement. All your fine skills go away. It brings your thinking down to saving your life or the life of someone else who is in jeopardy, and it takes a while to come off of that. If you've never been in it, you simply don't know. Nothing disparaging, you just can't know. I can't know what it's like to birth a child because I'm not a woman, so I can't say what it's like. But I can tell you what it's like to be in a shooting. Been there and done that and got the bloody t-shirt. Some of these officers have too. It ain't fun. It ain't fun days later either, folks. And your mind will shut down to whatever's the basic necessities of what you need. And it requires good attorneys, like that lady sitting right there, to try and bring it out. It requires good investigators like Doug to bring that out. Doug saw that in umpteen dozens of cases, and it finally dawned on him to say, we need an app for that. And that's exactly what this app does. It allows that officer to think. It helps that officer to capture everything that took place in a deadly force incident. And I can say that convincingly to myself because I've watched this app develop. I'm proud to tell you this sheriff's office was a part of it. We did beta testing for Doug. We did beta testing for us, for law enforcement, and we saw the value of what it did. And that's the whole purpose of this app, is to be able to capture as much information as we can possibly capture in a use of force incident so that we can then have a narrative to tell the public what actually happened. Because you know what you'll do as a news media, and I'm not bad-mouthing you, it just is what it is. As news media, you're going to tell the narrative that somebody tells you, aren't you? That's what you do. You report the news, and if only one person or a couple of people on the other side of the fence tell the narrative and we don't, you're going to run with the narrative you've got. And it's our responsibility from the government side to tell our narrative as soon as possible. We've never been able to do that before because we've never quickly captured information like this app allows an officer to do. Now, the beautiful part about it is it captures this for the officer. And then that officer can then hand that information off through the app to their attorney so that their attorney can advise them from the very get-go. Because we know now it's a standard. Two things are going to happen to you. You're going to be looked at in the use of force case. You're possibly going to be charged if you made any error that looks like it may be a violation of the law. And at minimum, if you're not actually charged with a crime, you're going to have to stand in civil court because somebody's going to sue you because an attorney is going to go to them and convince them they need to sue you. Well, guess what, folks? What that has done is called a trickle-down effect. And in law enforcement nationwide today, we have so many openings, some agencies cannot fulfill their duties each day. I'm 47 people down in my agency today. Agencies around me are just like me. It has reached every part of the USA. It's not popular to be a law enforcement officer today because of what we're seeing happening over the last couple of years of these constant prosecutions of officers when it's not correct, such as the officer that she defended. The narrative was quickly told in one direction, but he had to have it pulled out through attorneys and investigators, which would have been much better had they had an app right then to be able to defend themselves with. The spinoff to that is, for every agency out there, if you're a good agency and you require use of force reports, you want that data. You want that officer to be able to capture that data on their app so that when they fill out their use of force report, it is a much more comprehensive and a much more open report, not showing just what they did, but why they did it, what happened in the case that caused them to respond the way they did. And that's transparency, folks, which is what our public and you as the news media always want, transparency. So again, I'm going to try and keep it short because I'm getting a look now that I'm overdone. But I will be available after this to interview with any of the news media that wants to. I can stand here for an hour and talk to you about it. I am so excited about this app because I know it will protect our officers. I know it will allow them to have their cognitive thoughts put down in information for their attorneys. And I know that by having it, they'll be able to use their app to fill out their law enforcement reports to better explain to me and the public at large why they reacted the way they did. Thank y'all for being here today. I'm going to introduce another fellow to get up here and talk to you for a few minutes, and hopefully he won't get a high sign. One of our state representatives, Barry Fleming.
Thank you, Sheriff. It's my honor to be here today. I agreed to come today because I really feel that this is extremely important advancement in our ability as a society to have the kind of protection we want from our law enforcement agencies, and it has everything to do with recruiting and keeping good people. 20 years ago, before I was representing Columbia County in the Georgia House of Representatives, I was chairman of the Columbia County Board of Commissioners. And I went to school at the Clay Whittle School of Public Service. And I learned an awful lot from our sheriff. But here's one thing I learned very important, and it's why it does not surprise me that Columbia County is the first agency, and Sheriff Whittle is leading the way, to bring forth such an innovative product to help us recruit and keep good law enforcement officers. And that is that this is one of the best sheriff's offices in the state of Georgia. One of the first offices to become accredited in the state. And I remember learning about that as a county commission chairman, what a great job they did. I went on to serve and do serve now Columbia County in the Georgia House of Representatives. And I can tell you from discussions I've had with the governor, from discussions I've had with my fellow senators and members of the Georgia House of Representatives, we struggle in this day and age to try to find ways to help our local law enforcement officials. I just don't see it from a state legislature position. I see it from an attorney because part of my practice is local government law. I represent 4 different cities and 4 different counties, and I can tell you quite often a lot of my time as a city or county attorney is spent with law enforcement officials because they deal with the worst of the worst. They have to go to the worst situations. They have to deal with the people in society that the rest of us wouldn't have a clue on how to handle. And so the pressures upon them have always been there, but as the sheriff said, never has the day come like today where the pressure is so great on them because there is a concerted effort, unfortunately, by some people to discredit what they do, and they quite often use the terrible opportunity of a critical situation where force had to be used. And I can tell you right now, as a lawyer that has to deal with those on occasions, getting that officer to communicate to you exactly what happened when that situation occurred is so important, not only to help him, but to help the public in general and the media to know exactly what happened there, because when the information doesn't come out as it could, it hurts. And that's exactly what this incredible app for this phone does today. So I can tell you how excited I am as a lawyer. I can tell you how excited I am as a person who represents local government. I can especially tell you how excited I am as a state legislator trying to figure out ways, along with our governor, to help local law enforcement. And it is no surprise to me at all that Sheriff Whittle and the Columbia County Sheriff's Office is leading the way to bring something forward that I think will be an incredible tool. And it just, you sit back sometimes like this sheriff and you wonder, how come nobody thought of this before now? Well, that's how great things begin, because somebody did think about it, and I wholeheartedly recommend this to you. It's something that will be great for not only our community, but eventually our state and as our nation, is this ability to have better law enforcement, better recruitment. How many chiefs of police and sheriffs can you talk to now? They will tell you it is so hard to get folks to consider going into law enforcement because of all the things that are going on in our society. When you can go to them and show them we're taking active efforts to make you a better officer and serve your community better and take care of you when you have to deal with that terrible situation, it's got to help with recruitment and keeping good officers in the force. So I can't tell you how excited I am today, and there's no surprise to me at all that Columbia County is once again leading the way. Thank you, Sheriff.
And I'll take just a second to introduce Miss Adrienne Browning of Tucker & Browning. Again, she's the attorney that represented Zachariah Presley. Got to know her, and I tell you what, a very good trial attorney. So if you'll come up for a few moments, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you for bringing the Thin Blue Defend to law enforcement community and to us as their counsel. As Doug stated, I had the honor of representing Officer Zachariah Presley in the jury trial that resulted from his use of force incident in Camden County. I remember Doug brainstorming for this app. We had 3 very long days of jury deliberations. It felt like much longer. We were in a small attorney workroom. Doug, we had a use of force expert, my client's family, waiting to see what the jury was going to do. And I remember Doug first starting to talk about this app or the concept or needing something for these very scenarios to make sure the officers were put in these situations as infrequently as possible. So I'm so happy that this has come to fruition now, and I'm very proud to support its launch. So whether it's assisting an officer in just writing a report, a use of force report, or perhaps preparing for grand jury testimony, or even a jury trial, there are certain pieces of information that an officer won't necessarily remember, or, as Doug brought up, just didn't think was that important. And we lawyers might not like to admit it, but we can miss things too. And so one crucial aspect of use of force defenses, as we've heard, is what was the officer thinking and why did he or she do what they did in that scenario? And this app will definitely help make sure we have those answers and that we can prepare the best defense possible, or even better, prevent any prosecution at all. There were certain things in Zach's case that Doug and I learned months, even up to a year after his incident, and they are things that would have been documented at the time if Zach would have had the Thin Blue Defend to walk him through those important steps and questions. Things like non-visible injuries, prior knowledge of the suspect, lighting, weather, all things that played into and some of which were crucial in his defense. Zach was ultimately acquitted of involuntary and voluntary manslaughter, but having the Thin Blue Defend at the time certainly would have made our jobs a little easier and given us less of an uphill battle. There are other attorneys like myself, Mr. Barber, who you will hear from, that we get that call in the middle of the night, we put on a ball cap and we roll out to wherever the scene is and we're there in real time, but that's a smaller percentage of those cases. There are officers involved in incidents all the time where they don't have an attorney right there on scene to take care of them within the hour. And so this app would be an incredible, I guess, kind of replacement for that, to make sure that the stuff that we need documented right then is documented. So from my perspective, in the defense of these use of force cases, the Thin Blue Defend is an invaluable tool for officers involved in these types of critical incidents. So thank you to Doug, and thank you to everybody who has supported him and assisted him in its creation. Thank you.
And definitely one last one, but definitely not the least at all, is Mr. Keith Barber. Mr. Barber is an attorney out of Statesboro. He's on our board of directors also. But he is a PBA attorney, and I've worked many cases with him since I've retired on representing officers. So, Mr. Barber.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor and a privilege for me to be here today. Thank you, Doug, for getting this app together. I think it's cutting edge. I think it will help law enforcement officers on the street and otherwise in a tremendous way. In the past, ladies and gentlemen, law enforcement personnel have been pretty much on their own as far as what information to put in their use of force report, what depth, and things of that nature. But every little fact in these sometime lethal situations or exchanges needs to be documented thoroughly, very much so. It is imperative that an officer have the tools and resources to document what is happening at each and every stage of an incident. And as been talked about previously, they've just went through a life and death situation. It's a tremendous amount to ask an officer, sit down and tell me everything that happened. But this app does an excellent job of prompting, asking questions. What was the weather? What was an injury you had? Where were you sore? How much equipment did you have on? Things like that, that might not even be brought up at all in the heat of the moment, so to speak. This is a tool that will allow the most thorough gathering of information during use of force incidents. And that is so important. I know Ms. Brownlee talked about it's usually in the middle of the morning when these things happen. People are running around, they're rushing back and forth, ambulances coming and going possibly, fatalities, things of that nature. There's a lot going on, but these facts have to be gathered and collected and documented. And we need to do this for many various reasons. Some of them which are to be fair to the law enforcement officers involved in the incident, to be fair to the other people that are involved in the incident, and to be fair to the public at large in regards to these incidents. The Thin Blue Defend is the best tool that I've ever seen, which allows officers and their attorneys to capture this information, hands down, which in turn allows attorneys to better advise and represent law enforcement officers in these critical situations. I believe this resource will allow all of us to come to just and fair decisions and resolution of these cases, which I believe we are all in favor of. Thank you very much.
I have a great team with me on 7-8 Technologies is the parent company that we created, and having other people here, board of directors, Bill Doyle, Brian Patterson, and then Trish Reddish, who works with us, Jenna McKelvey. But all these people and attorneys that we have on board to help us, a great team of folks, and especially my wife of 40 years, coming up on September the 11th, 9/11. What a day, right? Married 40 years, so thank you to her. But right now, we'll entertain any question and answers that session that you may have, or we can do it individually, or however y'all would like to proceed. But thank you to the sheriff for being the first in the nation to have this app for his people, and really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.